I thought the ring was the only promise, but it turns out actions are the biggest promise of all. That's what little Kendra said. At the very moment, an entire powerful corporation bowed before the truth. An orphan girl, a forgotten promise, and a secret buried for 12 years. It all began with a broken-down car by the roadside and ended with a creative center named after her. You won't believe what happened between those two moments. The bright red Mustang sat silently on the edge of a misty country road. Its hood popped open like the mouth of a wounded creature, wisps of smoke curling into the pale gray autumn sky. Rain had just ended, and droplets still fell from the bare tree branches, landing squarely on the gleaming gold watch resting on the car's dashboard. A strange sight for such a quiet, rural stretch, as if someone had dragged a slice of city glamour into the middle of nowhere. Kendra Wilson approached, each step crunching softly on the carpet of dead leaves. She was 10 with brown skin, neatly braided hair, a faded backpack on her shoulders, and an expression that was both wary and curious. She wasn't afraid of strangers, not out here where seeing a stranger was practically an event. But what made her slow down wasn't the smoke or the fancy car. It was the man sitting slumped beside the front tire. He didn't look like someone in distress. He looked like a king who had just been dethroned. Flawless gray suit, silk tie swaying slightly in the breeze. Salt and pepper hair combed with such precision even a storm couldn't ruffle it. But his eyes, they were hollow, like he'd just lost something money couldn't replace. "Do you need help, sir?" Kendra asked, her voice small but clear, keeping a safe distance. The man turned, his gaze swept over her like he was calculating. A child? Out here? In the middle of nowhere? "No, thank you," he said flatly. "This is a performance vehicle. I need a real mechanic." Kendra tilted her head, raised a brow. She shrugged off her backpack, unzipped it, and pulled out a greasy glove and a worn-out socket wrench set. "You can call roadside assistance if you want," she said with a shrug. "But out here? Might take till afternoon. Me, I think your air filter's just clogged." The man opened his mouth, ready to dismiss her, but then he paused. As Kendra crouched by the car, tying back her braids with a sun-faded rubber band, the sunlight hit her fingers just right. That's when he saw the ring. An old, worn gold ring, but the emerald in the center was still bright, still deep. He inhaled sharply. His heart skipped a beat. "That ring!" His voice dropped, nearly cracked. "Where did you get it?" Kendra looked up, reflexively covering the ring. "It belonged to my foster mom, Dana. She passed last year." Her eyes softened. "She said it was a promise, that someone would come back one day." The man went still. His breath faltered. A wave of memory, dark, tidal, crashed over the composure of a man who once bent New York's stock market with a flick of his hand. 12 years ago, he had visited an orphanage, Starlight Haven, on the outskirts of town. A run-down place, but filled with hope. Back then, he was just a rising entrepreneur. Among rows of nameless children, one girl stood out, with sharp, silent eyes. He knelt, gave her that ring, a family heirloom, as a vow. "I'll come back. I'll take you with me." But he never got the chance. The orphanage shut down 3 weeks later. All records vanished. Every lead disappeared. The girl's name, Kendra W., was marked in red in a confidential file he later unearthed, next to a shaky purple-inked line. Subject A, must be kept hidden at all costs. He'd hired detectives, torn through systems. 10 years, millions of dollars, all chasing a lost promise. And now, that child, with those familiar eyes, oil-streaked hands, and a calm voice that spoke like nothing unusual was happening, was right here, beside the car he loved most. Franklin Royce, CEO of Royce International, a man who once believed he controlled everything, suddenly realized some things can never be owned, not with power, not with wealth. The ring, planted 12 years ago, had finally begun to grow. And the truth that was buried, it was about to rise. Not gently, not easily, but necessarily, like light at the end of a long, dark tunnel. Franklin Royce sat there, eyes fixed on the ring as if it could speak. In his mind, fragmented memories came flooding back. The dim lights of Starlight Haven, the bright laughter of a little girl fixing a radio with her bare hands, and a promise he never kept. Meanwhile, Kendra remained patiently crouched over the open hood, tapping lightly on the air filter with a rusted screwdriver. She had no idea she was standing in the eye of a storm made of memories. "Your name is Kendra, isn't it?" Franklin asked, his voice now softer, shakier, the kind of tremble he hadn't felt in years. The tremble that comes when you say something that matters, not to convince others, but to untangle something in yourself. "Yes," the girl replied, then looked at him with a hint of confusion. "How do you know?" Franklin pressed his lips together. He nearly said, "Because I once wanted to adopt you." But at this moment, that truth would only be a burden. He exhaled. "You look like someone I used to know." Kendra nodded slightly, like she'd heard that line 100 times before. Every orphan had a face that triggered nostalgia in others, but it never changed anything. The car gave a gentle shudder as Kendra tried restarting the engine. Franklin turned to see the warning light fade and the engine purr softly, smooth, clean, like she had just pulled a splinter from the wheel of fate. "Where did you learn to fix cars?" he asked. "Uncle Leroy taught me. He's my foster dad, mechanic in Bunker Hill, 20 miles from here." Kendra wiped her hands on her shirt and smiled faintly. "He said, learning to fix machines is how you learn to save yourself." Franklin nodded. He'd never believed a child could stir in him something like redemption. But Kendra was different. She didn't know who he was, didn't fake politeness, didn't ask for anything except a running engine. Then, like the morning's final bit of magic, Franklin's phone rang. He frowned at the caller ID. "Arthur Whitmore, Genesis Project." He picked up, turning his back to Kendra. "Franklin." The man's voice was curt. "We have a problem. A new internal report just leaked. A child from List A may still be alive, off-grid. Code KW12. KW? Franklin's voice was tight. "Kendra Wilson?" "Possibly," the man replied, lowering his voice. "She's the only case Dana Preston personally signed off on. The nurse who fled with the subject in 2014, the girl may not have died in the Route 7 accident like we thought." Franklin swallowed hard, gripping the phone tighter. A child with mechanical intelligence off the charts could bypass digital locks with a hairpin. "Ring a bell?" Arthur's voice hissed. "If she's alive, and if she knows anything about Genesis, we cannot let her be exposed." Franklin hung up. His heart thudded violently. She was right there, 3 steps away. And he, the man who had initiated the Genesis Project as a juvenile talent identification program for defense research, was now face-to-face with the consequence he thought had been buried. "Where are you headed now?" Kendra asked, packing up her tools into her backpack. "Need a ride? I can drop you at the nearest gas station." Franklin looked at her, and in that instant, he saw again the eyes of the child who once asked him, "If I'm good, will you come back for me?" "No need," he said quietly. "I'll take you home." Kendra tilted her head. "But I didn't say I wanted to go home." Franklin laughed. A helpless kind of laugh, the kind you make when a small fish pulls you off balance while you're trying to catch a whale. "You like mechanics?" "I like things that can be fixed," Kendra said, for the first time letting something shadowed peek through her steady tone. "Because there are things in life that no matter how you try, you can't fix." Franklin gripped the steering wheel. That sentence, it pierced his chest like a needle threading through years of silence. He looked at the ring, still on her finger. It once belonged to his mother, a family heirloom he'd never given to anyone, except the child in that orphanage. A promise unfulfilled, a story buried beneath stacks of classified project files, a seed once sown for a world he believed had been erased from his empire's map. But that seed was alive, breathing, laughing in front of him. Franklin Royce had never feared losing money, losing a board seat, or even his freedom. But for the first time, he feared losing his chance at redemption. Inside the Mustang, Franklin drove slowly along the dirt road, while Kendra sat beside him, her head slightly tilted toward the window, eyes following the rows of bare trees slipping past behind them. "What do you do for work, sir?" the girl asked casually. Franklin glanced at her. "I used to do a lot of things, but now I try to fix what I've done wrong." Kendra let out a soft chuckle. "Sounds a lot like being a mechanic." He smiled but didn't reply. A few minutes later, they stopped at an abandoned warehouse by the river. It had once been a Royce International test lab sealed off 7 years ago for safety violations. Franklin pulled a key from his coat pocket. "Want to see something secret?" he asked. Kendra raised an eyebrow. "Are there robots?" "Something more real than robots." The old steel door creaked open. Inside was heavy darkness, but once Franklin flipped the switch, the place lit up like a forgotten dream. Dozens of workbenches, half-finished mechanical models, dismantled circuit boards, and at the center, a wooden table covered with a dusty sheet of glass. Beneath it were stacks of schematics, folders, and a silver hard drive. Kendra was drawn to it like a magnet. "Can I look at this?" She pointed to the drawings. Franklin nodded. "Go ahead." But he didn't expect what came next. Within seconds, Kendra had pulled a bobby pin from her braid and cracked open the hard drive, one protected by triple-layer encryption. "How did you—" Franklin started. Kendra gave a sheepish smile. "I like tinkering. Every time my foster mom told me not to mess with the printer, I tried fixing it to make it faster." On the screen, folders appeared. Genesis, say candidates, project, notes. Dana. Esque. Deleted, yet recovered. She paused. "Genesis? What's that?" Franklin didn't answer. His knuckles whitened against the table's edge. A wave of nausea surged up like a tsunami. He drew in a breath. "It's a mistake." Kendra clicked the first folder. A list appeared. Photos of children, behavioral notes, brain scans. Headings read, "Reflexes beyond threshold. IQ 143, not yet 8 years old. Built power generator from bicycle." And then, KW12, female, brown skin, mechanical aptitude, missing since 2014. Dana Preston, suspected defection. Kendra froze, her eyes fixed on the screen, then shifted to Franklin. "KW12, that's me?" Franklin nodded, just barely. "So, I'm just part of a test." Her voice trembled. "No, not like that." Franklin stepped forward. Genesis was originally a talent search program, identifying gifted children to support research. But then, it was corrupted. "Corrupted?" Kendra asked. "What do you mean?" "My father wanted to use kids like you for defense applications. Trained from early on, behavior modified, turned not just brilliant, but absolutely obedient." Kendra stepped back. Her face turned pale. "So, I'm not just me?" "No," Franklin burst out, almost shouting. "You are you. You're not a product. That's why Dana took you. She betrayed the project. And I let it happen." Silence thickened. Lights flickered. Kendra's shadow stretched across the wall like a ghost of the past itself. "What were you going to tell me in the beginning?" she asked, her voice firmer now. "Why did you come to the orphanage that day?" Franklin turned away. His eyes welled. "Because I used to be like you. I was once chosen too, but I forgot until I saw your eyes in that place, and I realized I had become the very man I once hated." "And you never came back," Kendra whispered. "Dana waited. I waited too." Franklin didn't deny it. There was nothing left to defend. A second later, the warehouse door swung open. Footsteps. Then Arthur's cold voice. "I guess you finally found her." Franklin stepped in front of Kendra. "You were tracking me. We can't let her remain out of containment. She knows about Genesis. She's a living leak." "You're not gonna touch her," Franklin said, each word like stone. Arthur smirked and glanced outside. Two men in black suits, earpieces at their shoulders, began approaching. Kendra looked at Franklin. "Can we run?" He shook his head. "No need." Franklin pulled a black USB drive from his coat. "I've sent copies of the entire Genesis archive to a journalist and a senator," he said, facing Arthur. "If anything happens to this girl, the entire program goes public." Arthur clenched his fists. "You've betrayed the corporation." "No," Franklin replied. "I'm saving her." Kendra gripped his hand, for the first time with full trust. And when the two men stepped back, following Arthur's order, the rain began to fall outside. Thin like a veil of the past, washing down, rinsing away a dark chapter of truth. Rain slammed against the metal roof like the pounding drums of fate. Franklin stood in front of Kendra, his body trembling. Not from cold, but because, for the first time in his life, he realized he no longer stood with power. Arthur stepped forward, eyes sharp as blades, flanked by two men in black suits, hands hovering near their jackets. Wind howled through the cracks in the warehouse door, sending the scattered Genesis files flying. On the computer screen, red text still flashed. Subject A, security clause activated. "What are you doing, Franklin?" Arthur snarled. "We had a deal. Genesis was shut down, the data sealed, and any remaining traces were to be erased." "She's not a trace," Franklin said quietly. "She's a person." "Not to the buyers," Arthur shot back. "You think I don't know? All those years you tracked Dana, hired investigators to find the girl, not out of guilt, but to salvage the project." Franklin didn't answer, but when you saw her standing there with that worn-out ring on her hand, Arthur let out a cold laugh. "You changed your mind. How poetic, and how incredibly stupid." Kendra squeezed Franklin's hand. She didn't understand everything they were saying, but she could feel it. This wasn't just her story anymore. This was a moment where a grown man, a man who had once broken everything, had to choose if he was brave enough to make it right. "Arthur, you don't get it," Franklin said, his voice stripped of power, leaving only weariness. "I once believed Genesis was the future, a place to find extraordinary minds. But now I see. The only extraordinary thing was that these kids survived without turning into monsters." Arthur waved his hand. "I'm not here to debate ethics. I'm here to erase data." He signaled. The two men behind him pulled out a signal jammer and a file incinerator. The laptop screen dimmed, files began to vanish, line by line, devoured by darkness. "No!" Kendra shouted. "You promised!" Franklin stepped in front of the computer. "You touch it. I send a second copy to Senator Halverson and a reporter at the Washington Post," he said clearly. "And you know how much they love federal abuse scandals." Arthur froze. "You wouldn't dare." "I already have." Franklin opened his coat, revealing a phone with a blinking light. "Genesis files. Transmitting." Silence. The rain screamed overhead. Arthur exhaled hard. "You'd destroy your life for a child?" Franklin looked at Kendra. She was trembling, but her eyes didn't flinch, the eyes of someone who'd been treated like a test subject and survived. "No," he whispered. "I'm saving mine." Arthur gave the retreat signal. The two men packed up and backed off. As they turned to leave, Arthur glanced over his shoulder. "We won't forget this, Franklin. And the people behind Genesis won't forgive traitors." Franklin didn't answer. The warehouse door slammed shut, leaving them amid scattered pages, a dimmed screen, and the ragged breath of a 10-year-old girl. That night, Franklin drove Kendra to his home, not a mansion, but a 2-story brick house in the suburbs, where he lived with his mother as a young man. The kitchen still smelled faintly of old pine, and her photo still hung by the window. Kendra ate dinner in silence. Franklin sat across from her, placing the intact USB on the table. "You can give it to the government," he said calmly, "or keep it, or choose something else." "I don't understand," Kendra said, looking up. "Dana didn't protect you to get revenge," he continued. "She wanted you to grow up free, but if you choose to speak up, not just for yourself, but for the others who were robbed of that chance, I'll stand with you." Kendra went still. "You won't get to forget," he added. "You won't live a normal life, but you'll be doing what's right." Kendra looked at the ring on her hand. Then she picked up the USB and turned to Franklin. "I want to tell the story, but in my way." "What do you mean?" "I want people to see that even broken things, if you're patient, can be fixed. And you'll be the first to say sorry." Franklin laughed. A real laugh, the first in years. "Then where do we begin?" Kendra looked out the window, where the rain had finally stopped. "We start where I stood, on the other side of a forgotten promise. 5 years later, on the very ground where the Starlight Haven Orphanage once stood, now rose a modern building of glass walls and wind turbines spinning steadily on the roof. The Kendra Wilson Innovation Center, a free training hub for children with a gift for mechanics, especially those from underprivileged backgrounds. No IQ tests, no leaderboards, only small hands, tiny screws, circuit boards, and eyes lit with passion. At the grand opening, hundreds gathered, from government representatives and the media to families once affected by child talent optimization programs like Genesis. But the person who drew the most attention wasn't the state governor or billionaire Royce. It was a small, straight-backed 15-year-old girl in a simple canvas jacket, her braids neatly tied. Kendra Wilson. She held the microphone in one hand. The other still wore the emerald ring from years ago, now a perfect fit. "The first day I was taught to fix machines," she began, her voice steady, "Uncle Leroy told me something I never forgot. If you want to fix something, you have to understand why it broke." A few people chuckled, but all eyes remained on her. There are things in life, like trust, like childhood memories, that when broken can't just be replaced. They have to be repaired, piece by piece, story by story, crack by crack. She turned slightly toward the back row where Franklin sat. Not at the front, not in a reserved seat, but tucked away like a father watching from a quiet corner. No one called him CEO anymore, but everyone knew he was the only one from Genesis's board who publicly acknowledged his role, accepted punishment, and, more importantly, started again. Without titles, without an office. Mr. Franklin made a big mistake, Kendra continued, her voice holding no bitterness, only truth. But he was also the first to protect me when I had no one left. I don't forgive on behalf of everyone, but I choose not to live trapped in anger. She paused, then pulled out a small printer. It looked like a toy, and switched it on. It began printing little slips of paper. Each one bore a quote from a child currently studying at the center. "I wired solar lights for Grandma's house. I finally understand how a radio makes sound. I want to build a ventilator that runs without electricity." Kendra smiled. "This is the justice I choose, not to make someone bow their head, but to help others lift theirs." The applause that followed wasn't thunderous. It was rhythmic, certain, like the sound of a gavel sealing the end of an old era. After the ceremony, once most guests had left, Kendra walked behind the workshop area. A patch of the original wall had been preserved, the former entrance to the Starlight Haven orphanage. There, she mounted a small brass plaque, "Where a promise was once left behind." Franklin approached slowly from behind. He looked older than 5 years ago, but his eyes were brighter. "You know," he said quietly, "through all the years I was under supervision, the only thing that kept me going were the letters you sent." "Which one?" Kendra asked, turning. "The first one. It had just one sentence." He smiled. "I think you're starting to learn how to fix things." They both laughed. Light, easy, like the rain from 5 years ago had finally cleared from within. Franklin reached into his pocket and took out something small, old but polished. "This I kept. It belonged to Dana," he said, handing her a tiny wrench engraved with the words, "No one is too small to fix the world." Kendra accepted it, her eyes shining. "I'll hang it in the machine room." She turned away for a second, then looked back. "You know, I used to think the ring was the only promise that mattered, but now I believe it's what we do that makes the biggest promise." Franklin nodded. "And you've kept it fully." In a world filled with noise and conflict, there are stories so small they're easy to forget. But it's those stories of a girl who loved machines, a worn-out ring, and a grown man who finally said, "I was wrong," that remind us, justice isn't about ending pain, it's about beginning again, with truth, courage, and humanity. If this story touched your heart, leave a like to support the extraordinary lives hidden within ordinary days. Share this video with someone. You never know who might need a little hope, just like Kendra once did. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to walk with us where unfinished promises are rewritten with courage and kindness. Thank you for listening.